again, without any further delay, we're going to introduce the Reverend Robert Ives, known as Bob or Bobby to some, founder of the Carpenter's Boat Shop and friend to most of you.
Thank you so much. Lovely to see you all. Having Clayton right in the front row is a little intimidating. Clayton, as many of you might know, was the rowing coach at Cornell University, rowed at Cornell. So to have an expert in my midst is a little bit overwhelming. But I'll turn to Clayton for any real information.
You're the expert upon none.
So thank you again for coming. I'm not sure really what this will be. I'd like it to be more of a discussion, perhaps a little talk, but we'll just kind of share information about boats, about boat building, boat construction, and rowing shells in particular. But let me begin by sharing a little story with you first. It'll just kind of set the stage. On February 21st, 1986, February 21st, 1986, at 2 o'clock in the morning, the Monhegan Island light went out. A call went out from the mainland to the Coast Guard station on Monhegan Island. Let me just see, how many know Monhegan and Monhegan have been there? Okay, you're all pretty familiar with the scene. Obviously Monhegan, a kidney-shaped island, Monhegan, the kidney stone, and then a little island off of there called Smutty Nose. So anyway, the call comes out from the mainland, get up, the light is out, get across to Monhegan where the lighthouse is. They live on Monhegan, get across the harbor to Monhegan to turn the light on. The Coast Guard men get up, they go down to the wharf there. There's a big railway with a peapod on it to launch right down the railway into the water. And everything was fine except for a few things. Firstly, it's February 21st. Secondly, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, not so light. Thirdly, it's 10 degrees. Fourth, it's snowing. And fifth, it's 10 degrees outside. Okay, so a little adverse conditions kind of going on. So the two Coast Guard men jump in the peapod to row over to Monhegan. Everything goes fine. They pull the lever. They shoot down the runway to go into the harbor water when suddenly the bow line of the boat snags around a bollard. It flips the peapod over and both go catapulting into Monhegan Harbor. They didn't even know it hit them. I mean, when you hit water on February 21st, it's about 39 degrees. You have about 15 to 20 minutes to live. And here they go in with their foul weather gear and boots on. Before they even realized what had happened, they were blown away from Monhegan Island, closer to Monhegan, but they ended up, after about 15 to 20 minutes in the water, they ended up on Smutty Nose Island. Just a ledge right there opposite Monhegan, about 200, 300 yards away from Monhegan itself. They were literally frozen. I mean, they're soaking wet. It's 10 degrees outside. Icicles are starting to form on them. But fortunately, one of the Coast Guard men had a VHF radio on him, waterproof, quickly gets on, calls the Coast Guard station in Boothbay Harbor and shouts, "We're dying, we're dying. Get over here immediately, otherwise we're dead." And the radio goes dead. The Coast Guard were just, I mean, they didn't know what to do. There was no way they could ever get over there, no way to save these men whatsoever. So they quickly call the head fisherman on Monhegan Island, a man named Sherm Stanley, and say, "Sherm, please do something. Try to get over to these guys. They're dying right on the island. They've been going overboard." Sherm quickly runs, 2 o'clock in the morning, to get Steve Rollins, 6'4", 240. Anyway, they go running down to Fish Beach. They get into a skiff, and no way could they get off that beach. I mean, their boats are 10 feet, and there were about 3 to 4 foot waves coming against them. They just couldn't even launch the boat. They quickly remember there's a dory behind one of the fish houses. They quickly grab the dory, pull it down, and launch the dory, about a 20-foot dory, 18 to 20-foot dory. They jump in and row all the way over to Smutty Nose Island with 3 to 5 foot seas, everything. They row over to the island in about 20 minutes. The men were literally almost dead. They actually had to carry them off, throw them into the dory, and bring them. And they didn't even know whether they were alive or dead. They bring them back to the island, and they had done it in just enough time to save their lives.
Nice.
Sherm and Steve Rollins received the highest possible award that the Coast Guard gives out, the Silver Star Award, only given for personal heroism and the saving of a person's life. So why am I telling you the story? Because that dory that they used to rescue those 2 Coast Guard men was built by the Carpenters. No self-glorification, but the reason I say this is because for every incoming class that we have, all these new boat builders, I always tell them that when you build a boat, you must build it well. You must build it carefully, and you must build it with great devotion and dedication, because that boat will do what it's carried on to actually do, but it also might have to save a personal life. So I tell you all of this because the person we're going to be speaking about was a person who built boats for 55 years. But he built them well, he built them carefully, and he built them with incredible devotion and dedication for 55 years. George Pocock. So how many of you had heard about George Pocock before today, or at least before Boys in the Boat?
Oh.
Okay, so that's wonderful. Anyway, so George Pocock, in my way of thinking, is kind of the Mozart of wood. And I call him the Mozart of wood because, like Mozart, who of course is born in the 1700s, in Salzburg, Austria, Mozart was born into a musical family. His father's concertmaster, violinist, he composes, he does everything in music, as the whole Mozart family. He was born and nurtured and reared in music. Starts playing the violin, of course, at 2 to 3, composing at the age of 5, and by the time he dies at the age of 35, he's composed over 500 significant pieces of music. George Pocock was the same, not in music, but in wood. He's born into a boat-building family for generations. His grandfathers, on maternal and paternal grandfathers, were both boat builders, even coaches, but boat builders principally. They built boats on the Thames River, and one built boats in the London area. They built shells. They also built sailboats and utility boats, all boats of all kinds. George Pocock's father, Aaron Pocock, a builder at a very special school, a place called Eton College. Maybe you've heard of Harrow and Eton. Eton was founded in a little further back than many of our places. It was founded in 1441. It was founded by some guy named King Henry VI, not Henry VIII, Henry VI. In any event, it's an old place. But George Pocock's father, Aaron Pocock, was the boat builder and the coach at Eton College for years and years. So that's the family that he's born into. They have 5 children: George, Aaron, Dick, and 2 daughters who were not boat builders, but the 3 sons ended up all in boat building. After George was born, unfortunately, his mother died 6 months later. So a real tragedy to the family, and Aaron remarried that way, but nevertheless, this is the milieu of the family: boat building, coaching, and rowing from the very, very beginning. So this is where George is nurtured, how he's influenced. He's a boat builder from about 10 years of age to 21 when he's living there in England. But sadly, Aaron Pocock loses his job because of a political kind of situation at Eton College and has no work what's to do. And so Dick, the older brother, and George decide to leave England and to go to another country, Australia. But it didn't work out. Then New Zealand didn't work out. So they ended up in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And they go there, really, just they have a little money. He had actually won it in a boat race that he had participated in. And they end up in British Columbia, and they set up a small boat shop there in an old warehouse, but they weren't selling too many boats, so they turned to lumbering and logging and a few other things, but they're always still building boats. And with the name of Pocock, that travels around the world because it's a significant name. And so they start building boats, and they do sell a few in that kind of way. Unfortunately, 2 years in this little warehouse, and George has a very serious accident. Okay, some of us boat builders know about these kinds of accidents, but at this particular point, George Pocock pushes his hand into a bandsaw.
No.
I don't know if you ever look at those pictures closely, but look at that picture of George Pocock screwing in a screw into a shell, and you'll see only 3 fingers. These 3. He lost these 2. Some of us have lost these over here, but nevertheless, we can empathize with one another in that kind of way. But he lost these 2. But they carry on. You do as well as you can, and at least he has 3 good gripping fingers for a screwdriver or using a saw. But that was the way he entered his almost 50 years of boat building, with 3 fingers. But at this point, a very fortunate thing happens. An individual by the name of Hiram Conabear, who's the coach at the University of Washington, hears about them and asks them to come down to the University of Washington. He has a spare warehouse, a little shop that's there, and he asks them to build boats for the University of Washington and to build boats generally. They take him up on that, and they go then from Vancouver Island down to Seattle, Washington, and that's where they start really building boats. Unfortunately, a little bit of an interim period. It's called 1914 to 1918. People aren't interested in rowing shells at that particular time. They're interested, unfortunately, in fighting a war that's going on, the First World War. But actually, they got more business during the war than ever before, because a man named Mr. Boeing of a company called Boeing Aircraft contacted them to build special components of different seaplanes that they were building during the war. And they were commissioned to build 150 different pontoons for these various different seaplanes that Boeing was manufacturing at that time. So they had good work all during the war. Actually, it ended up going until 1920. And at that point, Dick Pocock was asked to come out to Yale University to be a coach and a builder out there, and he took that opportunity. It left George there at the University of Washington to begin building there, which he did, and built not just for the University of Washington, but built, of course, shells, everything from singles to quads to 8s for colleges, individuals, all over the country. And he continued to do that for 55 years during. And of course, the culmination of it all is 1936, when he wins the first, obviously, Olympic gold medal in Munich, Germany, with the 8s that he has there. And that kind of puts him on the map publicly. And from that point on, everyone wanted a Pocock boat. But he wins the 36 Olympics, he wins the 48 Olympics, he wins the 52 Olympics, the 56 Olympics, and national awards from that point on. Certainly one of the greatest of our boat builders ever. So why was he so great? Well, he built well, he built carefully, he built with incredible devotion, but he also discovered something very important: wood. Most all shells, up until that time, were built, like this one here, with a hardwood core. In other words, boats are like bodies. You have a skeleton and you have skin. The skeleton is the frame of the boat, and most boats are framed, the skeleton, with hardwood. The skin is always softwood. Now, are we okay on those 2 words? Hardwood, softwood? Name, if you would, the 6 softwoods that are around you right here.
Cedar.
Cedar. Remember, anything with needles, an evergreen. These are all the softwoods.
Pine.
Cedar, pine.
Birch?
Birch.
No.
It has leaves. It has leaves. Anything with leaves,
It's hard.
deciduous, is a hardwood.
Ah, okay.
Anything with needles is an evergreen. Okay, so there's the difference. They're both kind of hard. If you get hit in the head with one, it's not that different. But there is a big difference in terms of how it floats in the water. And also the weight, of course. The hardwood's going to be twice as heavy as the softwood. So we have cedar and pine and hemlock, spruce, larch. Larch is also tamarack in Canada, larch often in Scotland, and hackmatack in Maine. Okay, that's our best softwood because it's a very hard softwood, rot resistant and wonderful for framing. So those are our softwoods in that way. Hardwoods are anything, again, that has leaves on it. And in shells, the hardwoods that we're going to be using would be maple and ash, and very rarely oak. It's a little too heavy for it. You want a shell to be as light as possible in that way. But nevertheless, those are the woods that are. The skeleton is made of hardwood. The skin is made of softwood. What is this softwood here? Spanish cedar. Correct. Very good. So this is Spanish cedar, but it's a variation of mahogany. It's just like mahogany, so it's really quite heavy. The difference between this boat and a Pocock boat is that in 1923, he learned from Native Americans out on Vancouver Island about western red cedar. A very simple wood, a beautiful wood. We have red cedar here, but it's not as like that. It's aromatic, but it's a very different kind of quality of wood. The western red cedar was amazingly, not dense, but it was amazingly light, very, very buoyant, highly rot resistant, and just a beautiful wood in general. And he learned about this wood, he kind of tested it out, and it performed beautifully. It's like, western red cedar is like a deer swimming in the water. How many of you have seen a deer swimming in the water? It's like half the body is out of the water because a deer has every single hair at the bottom, in the follicle of the hair, there's an air pocket. So when a deer goes into the water, it has this natural buoyancy because of all that air, which is insulating the deer, but also enables it to swim through the water just beautifully. When you see a deer swimming across Muscongas Bay, which I have a number of times when they get driven down to the edge, they swim over to Loud's Island, and as you see that deer going along, it's like it has a 5 to 10 horsepower Evinrude engine on the back, just kind of going right along, so beautiful. And half its body is out of the water. Western red cedar does the same thing. Pocock started putting it in his boats, and as soon as he did, those boats started winning more and more races because of the amazing buoyancy of that wood material. So it was a surprise to him, but also he began winning. But that was a very, very important advancement in shell construction at this particular point for that 50-year period. So anyway, we're getting on. Let me perhaps just describe a little bit about boat construction, or if you have any questions, I'd be glad to kind of share those types of things. Obviously, this boat is different than this boat, a round-sided boat, a flat-bottom boat. But again, they're about the same here. All the framing, which is the keel under here, and the keel sun in here. Notice the keel is longitudinal strip on the bottom. When you build a boat, you lay the keel, and then on top of the keel, you put a kelson, which is the longitudinal strip all the way down through there. I've shared this with my students. Walt Whitman once said, "Love is the kelson of life." Love is the kelson of life. So why did he say that? Because he knew about boats. But he also knew about life. And the kelson is the interior strip, like the backbone of your body. It's the interior strip into which everything comes. The stem, the transom, all of the ribs, they all flow into that kelson. So that's why the kelson is the most important part of every single boat. But you lay your keel and your kelson and then your transom and your stem, and those are all hardwoods. And then the skin, the planking around, are softwoods. Now here, the kelson in this boat is actually a softwood. But it's a good hard softwood, but very, very durable. Why would we put a softwood as the frame member here? Because we want to keep the boat as light as possible. And this is a material called Sitka spruce. Again, a West Coast item, Sitka, Alaska. Most oars, all of those rowing oars were made out of Sitka spruce. Remember, spruce even here on the East Coast is twice as strong as pine. Everyone thinks pine's the strongest wood. Pine's a very brittle wood. Spruce is a durable wood. You don't really find too many pines along the coast of Maine. They're all in the interior part. I mean, you'll find them here, but they're on the interior part because pines have to be together to grow straight, otherwise they'll break right off. And there's virtually no pines on Monhegan Island whatsoever. They'd be all broken off because they're brittle. It's spruce and fir that you see on the islands and along the coast. Pine is the interior wood in that way. So here's Sitka spruce there, and then the frames are made out of probably maple. They're very, very thin frames in this boat, maybe 1/4 of an inch, and then, so you have the Sitka spruce kelson, you then have your maple frames all the way along here, and then this is your planking here. How thick is that planking?
5/32 of an inch.
You've read the book. So let's translate. That sounds really kind of sophisticated, but what is 5/32? How big is that? A little bigger than 1/8 of an inch. Wow. A little thicker than 1/8 of an inch. So that if I step in this boat, I'm just going to go right through. It's when you step in it, you're going to be stepping on the frame of the boat. If you step on the planking, you know it's going to go in that type of way. And how do they put this planking on this boat? Sorry over there, but I'll show you here. This is like a veneer. Again, 5/32 of an inch. It is, again, Spanish cedar. And it goes from the kelson here all the way around to here. And this is how long it is. It is, here's the joint right there. So it's like a veneer piece that goes from here now all the way up to, oh my God, it goes all the way to the very end, right to here. And this is our stem right here. So it's a long piece of wood that is about, okay, 6 feet long. And then it's joined here. It's not a butt joint like this. It's a scarf joint like this. It probably goes about 2 inches. So they bevel this edge down here, they bevel this edge there, and they make them together. And then they're uniting it there with glue and tacks right over there. Then we come down to the next plank all the way down to, right to here. And then,
Oh, no. Yeah,
no, it's all the way to the end. So anyway, that's how, basically how it's built. The frame, the planking, and then the little cockpit here, the stretchers, the rowing seats, and then, of course, what's missing here are the outriggers here. So if you step in this boat without the outriggers and oars, Clayton, what would happen?
You would swim.
Yeah. So it would just go right over, you know. All of it is in the oars to keep it upright along that line. So while we're talking about this, let's get some of the basic statistics and facts about rowing shells. This is a single. We'll just talk about singles and eights. They're kind of the two prominent ones. Not to eliminate the fours and the twos or anything, but nevertheless, how big is this boat?
27 feet.
27 feet. They actually range from 26 to maybe 28 feet. They can go in different sizes that way, but 27 feet. How much does it weigh?
25 pounds.
30.
About 25 pounds. Very good. How fast does it go?
As fast as the rower.
Absolutely correct. How fast can it go?
Oh, well.
maybe about 8 miles an hour. Wow. Okay. How wide is it? Less than a foot. Okay. How much does it weigh? Did I?
25.
25.
Yeah.
Okay. How about an 8? How long is an octoped? Or
64
8?
feet.
60 to 64 feet. They'll vary. How wide?
2 feet?
20 inches. Less than 2 feet. 20 inches. 18, 20, in that way. There are all these variations. How much does an octoped weigh?
260.
About 200 to 240 pounds. Again, whatever the wood is that's in it in that way. How much weight does it have to carry?
8 times 2.
Eight people. About 1,700
9,
to
kind of.
2,000 pounds.
Don't forget the cost.
No, I'm
It's
sorry,
9.
of course, 9 people. Do all boats have a coxswain?
No.
Some don't, but usually there are.
Just the good ones.
Were you a coxswain?
I was.
At Exeter?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the only coxswain in Exeter's history to sink his shell.
Yay for you.
So we've got it 60 to 64 feet. It's 20 inches wide. It weighs about 200 to 240. How fast does it go? If 8 people are really rowing.
40 miles an hour.
12 to 14.
That's a little fast. That's when you put the Evinrude horsepower.
12 to 14.
12 to 14 miles an hour. Which means that if you row a race that's about 1.25 miles, you can do it in 4 to 5 minutes. That's how fast those things are moving, 4 to 5 minutes. So also they say that if you row that distance, 1.25 miles, full tilt, it's like playing a basketball game twice.
Yep.
In terms of the energy that is actually out there in that kind of way. So those are the kind of statistics, kind of what's going on. I'll share with you some very simple little interesting tidbits that one comes upon on that computer machine. And it was interesting, and I hadn't realized this, that rowing is the very first intercollegiate sport in the United States. I didn't realize that. And the very first intercollegiate race was in 1852. Harvard and Yale, 1852. And rowing is one of the first sports in modern Olympic Games, which I hadn't realized. From 1920 to 1956, the United States won gold medals in the men's eights at every Olympic Games, from 26 to 56. And for those who know this guy, Benjamin Spock, Dr. Benjamin Spock, who many of us a little older, I think, would remember him, who used to summer on Marsh Island, of course, also, would sail into Marsh Island. But Benjamin Spock was an Olympic rower in 1924 and won the gold medal in the eights. And Gregory Peck rowed at the University of California in 1937. And I guess I won't go on. So I think that's about it. Our time is kind of gone, unless there's any questions or thoughts or concerns you might have and want to share.
Where has modern shell construction gone? I
In
assume
terms
away from
of
wood and into
construction,
composites.
yeah, I think, Clayton, when you were at Cornell, did you ever row a wooden boat?
Always. There was nothing available except the Pocock.
Okay.
Well, I take that back. Almost all of the major college rowing programs used Pocock shells.
Yes.
Through my time and later.
Okay.
But the transition started taking place. The Europeans obviously started
Right.
with composite plastic.
Carbon
things,
fibers and the various different fiberglasses. And
There's only one that I'm aware of. Maybe Pocock still builds some wooden shells, but Graham King,
Oh.
that whose name some of you may know, the boat builder here in Putney, Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
He still builds a wooden one, but he
Oh,
also
yeah.
builds the fiberglass.
I think Graham King just stopped. And
Did he?
You can't get them in Europe. There's a guy named Stempley, who's for Switzerland, which I have one.
Oh, wow.
And they are beautiful wooden boats.
Wow.
They still make a few on special order. They're extremely expensive.
Wow.
But they're like Pococks, they're works of art.
Yeah.
And they kind of took over the market internationally in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
But about the fiberglass boats, all boats now are fiberglass or Kevlar, high tech.
Yeah.
Wooden boats are like, I still row one, I love it.
Yeah.
But they're kind of passe because of the weight.
Yes.
Kevlar boats are probably single, maybe the wooden single might be 33 pounds actually. And a Kevlar boat can get down to 28, 26.
20, okay.
And it's actually an international standard. You can't go below that weight.
Mm-hmm. Right.
For that. Interesting.
We actually, believe it or not, we had 2 Pocock 8s at the Carpenter's Boat Show.
Really?
A friend who was one of the coaches at Harvard University wanted to clear them out. They weren't using them anymore. Wow. And so this was around 81. And he called me and said, would you like to have 2 octopeds from Harvard? They're something called Pocock boats. I said, sure, I'll take them. That'd be great. And I said, but I don't know how to get them from there. I mean, these were 64-foot boats.
We actually have in our club in Philadelphia, which is what they call an octopede,
Yeah.
which is actually for scullers. So you have 16 oars, as opposed to an 8, which has 8 oars.
Right.
But we have a wooden octopede hanging from 1906, hanging in our boat club.
Oh my gosh, how
And
perfect.
you'd love it because the workmanship on it is
I mean, it's just
unbelievable.
absolutely
But it
sensational.
weighs a ton.
So anyway, we own 2. So he brought them here. I said, you know, how, he said, I'll deliver them if you want. And I said to him, wow, I'm a little nervous about getting a 64-foot boat. How are you going to get around Main Street, Damascotta? You'll take out the Baptist church there. Don't you worry, we'll get them there. And indeed, he delivered those.
They travel quite nicely, actually.
Yeah, they're absolutely fantastic. So we had them, but I suddenly realized, wait a minute, how am I going to row these things? On the Pemmican River, it's not so convenient to put it there, a 64-foot boat. And I eventually gave them to Camp Kiev. And they rowed them for about 10 years or so. They were in disarray also, and they had a hard time kind of keeping them together. But it was interesting because one of the rowers at Camp Kiev as a young boy ended up rowing in the Olympics as a rower that way. That's where he started, rowing in one of those octaves.
Wow.
Yes.
Been to the Arctic Museum at Bowdoin,
Yes.
where there's a beautiful kayak. It's native, indigenous made. So I'm just curious, what besides the red cedar, what other? There must be huge influences of the indigenous boat building techniques, including perhaps Polynesian boat builders.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, I would only say that probably that boat there that either Perry or probably Macmillan brought back from the indigenous community, which he brought back obviously a lot of items. That was probably framed with a hardwood of some kind, but it was covered in probably seal skins. And of course that was the covering material, as this is like a dacron material of some kind. I'm not sure really, it's so thin and very light and lovely. Often they were just simple canvas painted over along the line, but you're always looking for making the strongest, lightest boat you possibly can. But it would be framed with something hard and covered in something very flexible. So, I think we'll call it a day. Thank you very, very much for coming. Great we've got boats available.
We got
boats available. All my boat builders, let's get cracking. We're going to plank the bottom up right now.
Alrighty, so you heard that. The class needs to get back to class. If there are any of you who would like to get a full tour of the